The battlefield was silent except for the crackle of burning wreckage. Captain Reed Dawson moved carefully through the smoke, his boots crunching over glass and metal. The air smelled of plasma burns and dust. Hours ago, this place had been filled with noise, shouts, explosions, engines screaming. But now only silence and destruction remained. Reed's rifle hung loosely in his hand, ready, but his heart felt heavy. He had seen enough battles to know that war always ended the same way. Too many bodies, too much pain, and too little reason left to justify any of it. He stopped beside a half-destroyed transport ship. The metal hull had been torn open like paper. He looked inside but saw only shadows. As he turned to leave, he heard it. A faint, high-pitched sound that didn't fit in this ruined world. At first, he thought it was just the wind whistling through the wreckage. Then he heard it again, clearer this time. It was a cry. A child's cry. Reed froze. His pulse quickened. There weren't supposed to be any civilians here. Both sides had evacuated before the battle, but the sound came again, soft and broken, echoing across the burned ground. Without thinking, he followed it. His boots splashed through puddles of oil and water as he stepped over fallen armor plates. The noise led him to a narrow gap beneath a collapsed section of the ship. He crouched and lifted a sheet of metal, peering inside. In the dim light, he saw movement, a small figure pressed against the wall, trembling. Large silver eyes blinked up at him through the dust. Reed realized with shock that it wasn't a human child. The skin was a pale blue-gray, faintly glowing in the shadows. Tiny hands clutched at a piece of torn fabric. It was a Valari child, the enemy. For a moment, Reed's instincts screamed at him to back away. The Valari were dangerous. Everyone said so. Their ships had destroyed colonies, their soldiers had killed his friends. But as he looked closer, he saw the fear in her eyes, the same fear he had seen in every child on every ruined world. She couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 in human years. Her face was streaked with tears and ash. Reed lowered his weapon slowly. "Hey," he said softly, his voice calm. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The child flinched and pressed herself tighter against the wall. Reed set his rifle aside and held up both hands to show he meant no harm. He had no translator, but tone was universal. He crouched lower, trying to smile through the dust. "You're safe now, all right? I've got you." The child said something in her language, a trembling whisper he didn't understand. Her small body shook from cold or fear, maybe both. Reed reached into his pocket and pulled out his canteen. He set it on the ground near her and pushed it gently forward. "Water," he said, hoping she'd recognize the word. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, the girl reached out and took the canteen. She sniffed it carefully before drinking. Reed felt something inside him ease. He looked around. The area was quiet. No life signs on his scanner except hers. He could leave her there and report it to command, but he knew what that meant. They'd call it a liability and leave her to die. He couldn't do that. Not after everything he'd seen. "All right, kid," he muttered, adjusting his gear. "Let's get you out of here." She didn't understand the words, but she seemed to understand his tone. When he reached toward her, she hesitated, then crawled closer. Reed lifted the broken beam and gently pulled her free. She was lighter than he expected. As soon as she was in his arms, she clung to his jacket, her small fingers gripping tightly as if afraid he might vanish. He started walking back toward the human camp, keeping her wrapped in his cloak to shield her from the cold wind. Every few steps she looked up at him with wide, curious eyes. Once she tried to speak again, her voice quiet and musical, but Reed could only shake his head. "I don't understand, kid," he said softly. "But you're safe now." The walk back felt longer than any march he'd done. His mind replayed the moment he found her. The sound of her crying, the way she'd hidden from the world. He thought about the people she had lost, the ones who wouldn't come back. It reminded him of the refugees he'd seen years ago, the human children who'd cried for parents that never returned. War looked the same on every world. As he approached the camp, the guards at the gate saw him coming. One of them frowned when he noticed the small shape in Reed's arms. "Captain, what the hell is that?" Reed stopped. "She's a child," he said firmly. "She was alone out there. That's not a kid, sir, that's an alien." Reed's jaw tightened. "She's both. Now open the gate." The guards hesitated but obeyed. As he stepped inside, soldiers turned to stare. Some whispered. Others looked disgusted. A few just shook their heads. Reed ignored them and carried the girl to his tent. He set her on his cot and covered her with his jacket. She looked up at him again, eyes glowing faintly in the low light. Reed sat on a crate beside her, rubbing a hand over his tired face. He knew this was going to cause trouble. His commander wouldn't like it. The army didn't take kindly to mercy when it involved the enemy. But as he looked at the small alien girl drifting into uneasy sleep, he knew one thing for certain. He had done the right thing. Outside, the night wind blew through the ruins, carrying with it the faint smell of fire and metal. Inside the tent, a quiet peace settled. For the first time in days, Reed didn't feel like a soldier. He felt like something more, something human. He didn't know that his simple act of kindness would soon shake two worlds and bring an entire war to a standstill. But for now, he only watched the child sleep and whispered softly, "You're safe, little one. I promise." Morning came slowly over the camp, bringing pale light through the clouds of dust. Captain Reed Dawson hadn't slept much. Every sound outside his tent made him tense. The alien child, Lyra, was still asleep, curled beneath his jacket. Her breathing was soft, almost musical. Reed sat nearby, cleaning his weapon, though his mind was far away. He knew the moment his commanding officer found out, there would be trouble. Saving an enemy child wasn't something the military code had space for. He looked at her again and wondered how she had survived alone among the wreckage. Maybe her people had abandoned her in their retreat, or maybe her escape pod had crashed far from their forces. Whatever the reason, she was alive because he had chosen not to walk away. He didn't regret it, not for a second. The flap of the tent opened suddenly. Lieutenant Harris stepped inside, holding a data pad. His eyes widened when he saw the small alien under Reed's jacket. "Captain," Harris said, lowering his voice, "what is that?" Reed sighed. "A child," he answered simply. Harris took a step closer. "That's not human, sir, I noticed," Reed replied dryly. "She was trapped in the wreckage, alone. I couldn't leave her there." The lieutenant hesitated, then whispered, "You know this could end your career." "Command won't understand," Reed nodded. "Then I'll deal with it when they come. But until then, she stays safe." By noon, word had already spread across the camp. Soldiers whispered behind Reed's back. Some called him crazy. Others called him soft. A few just looked at him with quiet confusion, as if trying to decide whether to admire or pity him. When Commander Rourke arrived, everyone went silent. He was a large man with a voice that could silence a room. He stormed toward Reed's tent, his boots thudding hard against the dirt. Reed stepped outside before the commander could enter. "Captain Dawson," Rourke barked. "I hear you've brought in a—" He paused, glaring. "Non-human." "Yes, sir," Reed said, standing straight. "A Vilari child. She was left behind during the battle. I found her near the old transport site." Rourke's jaw tightened. "You were ordered to clear that area, not play nurse to enemy offspring." "With respect, sir," Reed said evenly. "She's just a kid. She was scared and hurt. I couldn't leave her to die." The commander stared at him for a long moment. "Do you know what that child represents? Her people killed thousands of ours. She's the daughter of the enemy that wants us all gone." "Maybe," Reed said quietly, "but she's not responsible for that." Rourke looked past him toward the tent. "Where is she now?" "She's resting. Then you'll hand her over. Intelligence will take her for questioning. Maybe they'll get something useful out of her before returning her to whatever's left of her people." Reed's chest tightened. "She doesn't know anything, sir. She's just a child. He stopped himself. "Please, let me keep her under my watch until we get orders from Central Command." The commander studied him, his expression cold. "You're treading on dangerous ground, Captain. You're a soldier, not a savior. Don't forget which side you're on." "I haven't, sir," Reed said quietly. "But maybe there shouldn't be sides when it comes to children." Rourke's eyes narrowed. For a second, it seemed he might order Reed's arrest, but instead he turned away. "You have 24 hours. After that, she's transferred to Intel. If you resist, I'll court-martial you myself." When he left, Reed stood still, the wind tugging at his uniform. Around him, soldiers avoided his eyes. He went back inside the tent. Lyra was awake now, sitting up and holding his canteen again. She smiled weakly when she saw him. Reed sat down beside her and tried to smile back. "Guess we've got a bit of a problem, kid," he murmured. She tilted her head, not understanding, but her eyes were trusting. He tore open a ration pack and offered her some of the dried fruit. She took it slowly, nibbling at it like a small animal. Watching her, Reed felt something stir in his chest, a kind of quiet warmth he hadn't felt since before the war. That night, Reed stayed awake again, listening to the faint hum of the camp. Every sound carried tension: the whispers of men, the distant engines of patrol ships, the ticking of the clock counting down the hours until morning. Lyra had fallen asleep again, one hand still gripping his jacket. Reed thought about his own daughter back on Earth, the one he hadn't seen in almost 4 years. She'd be about the same age as this alien child. Maybe that was why he couldn't walk away. War had taken enough from him already. He wasn't going to let it take what was left of his humanity. The next morning came too fast. Reed woke to the sound of boots outside. Harris rushed in. "Sir, Commander Rourke's men are coming. They've got an intel transport with them." Reed looked at the sleeping girl. "They're not taking her," he said quietly. "Sir, if you fight this, I'll handle it." Reed stood, picked up the girl carefully, and stepped out into the light. The commander and his men were waiting. Lyra stirred and clung to his neck. Rourke folded his arms. "Time's up, Captain." "Hand her over." Reed met his eyes. "No, sir." The camp went silent. Every soldier stopped what they were doing to watch. Rourke's voice hardened. "You're refusing a direct order?" "I'm following the only one that matters," Reed said. "Protect the innocent." For a long, heavy moment, neither man moved. Then Rourke finally lowered his hand and turned to his officers. "Stand down." Murmurs swept through the camp. The commander stared at Reed with something like disappointment, or maybe respect. "You'd better hope your mercy doesn't get us all killed, Captain," he said before walking away. Reed exhaled slowly. He looked down at Lyra, who was watching him with sleepy eyes. "Looks like we get one more day, kid," he whispered. "Let's make it count." He didn't know it yet, but far above the planet, an alien warship was already searching for a signal, and the child in his arms was the reason the stars themselves were about to go quiet. Far above the planet Valeth Prime, in the cold quiet of space, a silver command ship drifted among the stars. Inside it, the Violari High Matron Zayara stood before a glowing screen showing wreckage below. Her eyes, sharp and bright like polished metal, stared at the battlefield where her army had fallen. She had lost many soldiers in that last fight against the humans, but one loss tore through her heart more deeply than any other. Her daughter, Lyra, was missing. Every report said the same thing. The child's transport had been hit during evacuation. No trace of survivors had been found. Zayara refused to believe it. She had sent search teams across the entire sector, scanning every crash site, every escape pod. Days passed. Nothing. Her officers began whispering that it was hopeless. Still, Zayara did not rest. She barely ate, barely slept. Her mind was full of one thought: find her child. One evening, as the ship orbited over the ruins, a scout burst into the command chamber. "Hi, Matron," he said breathlessly. "We found something." She turned sharply. "Show me." The screen changed to grainy footage taken from a recon drone. The camera moved across a burned human base. Through smoke and dust, a tall human in dark armor walked, holding a small bundle in his arms. The drone zoomed closer. The small figure had silver eyes and pale blue skin. Zayara's heart stopped. It was her daughter, alive, but in the arms of a human soldier, her hand clenched on the console. The officers in the room fell silent. "Play it again," she ordered. They did. She watched as the human wrapped his cloak around the child, giving her water and carrying her carefully through the ruins. The sight was confusing, painful, but also strange. He was protecting her. "Identify him," she commanded. "Human rank, Captain Reed Dawson. Infantry Unit, Terran Colonial Forces," the officer replied. "He's stationed at Camp Rourke near the northern ridge." Zayara's jaw tightened. "Prepare my ship. I will retrieve her myself." Her advisor stepped forward nervously. "Hi, Matron, it's too dangerous. The humans will shoot you down if you enter their airspace. Let us send a rescue team." Zayara's gaze cut through him like a blade. "Would you trust another with your only child?" The advisor lowered his eyes. "No, my matron." "Then stand aside." Moments later, the Violari fleet shifted formation. Zayara's command ship descended through the atmosphere, its engines humming like thunder. Inside, she stood in the landing bay wearing her battle armor, silver and blue, symbols of her rank glowing softly on the chest plate. Her mind was torn between fear and anger. Fear for her daughter's safety, anger that her child was in the hands of a human, the same species that had taken so much from her people. As her ship broke through the clouds, She saw the human camp below, rows of metal shelters, guard towers, and walls made of dull gray steel. She raised a hand to her pilot. "Open a channel," she said. "Inform them we come under a white flag." The pilot hesitated. "They may not believe us." "Then they will learn." At the same time, down below, alarms blared through the human camp. Reed ran outside, holding Lyra's hand. The sky above them glowed red as massive alien ships appeared through the clouds. Soldiers scrambled for weapons. Commander Rourke shouted orders. "Everyone to battle positions." "Those are Velari warships." The girl hesitated, then ran toward her mother. Zayara dropped to one knee and caught her in her arms, holding her tightly. For a long time she didn't move. Her face softened. Her eyes closed as she pressed her forehead to her daughter's. A whisper escaped her lips in her language, something that sounded like a prayer. Reed stood a few steps away, watching quietly. Around him, human soldiers lowered their weapons slightly, unsure what to do. Even Commander Rourke seemed frozen by the scene. Finally, Zayara looked up at Reed. Her expression was unreadable, part suspicion, part gratitude. She rose to her full height, still holding the child. "You saved her," she said, her voice deep and steady. Her translator made the words clear. Reed nodded once. "I did. Why?" she asked, her tone cold but curious. Reed met her gaze without fear. "Because she was a child. Because leaving her there would have been wrong." Zayara studied him in silence. Around them, the tension in the air was heavy. Her soldiers watched from the ship. The humans stood ready behind their commander. Then Zayara slowly reached to her chest and touched the crest on her armor. She bowed her head slightly, a gesture no one expected. "For saving what is mine," she said quietly. "You have my gratitude." Rourke blinked in disbelief. No one moved or spoke. It was as if time had stopped. Reed nodded again. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "Perhaps not," she replied, "but I do not forget mercy." She turned and lifted her daughter into her arms, walking back toward her ship. Before boarding, she looked back one last time. "The humans speak of war, but today you reminded me that even in war there can still be honor." As her ship rose back into the clouds, the soldiers watched in silence. The alarms stopped. Reed stood alone in the middle of the field, his heart heavy and full at the same time. He didn't know that far above, Zayara was already giving a new command, one that would soon change the course of the entire war. The camp remained silent long after the Velari ship disappeared into the clouds. The soldiers still stood in place, unsure if what they had witnessed was real. Reed Dawson stared at the sky where the alien vessel had gone, his mind spinning. Just minutes ago, he had been sure he would die. Instead, he had handed the enemy's child back to her mother, and somehow no shots were fired. No one spoke, no orders came, only the sound of the wind blowing through the tents. Commander Rourke finally broke the silence. "What in the stars just happened here?" he muttered. His voice held no anger this time, only disbelief. He turned to Reed, his eyes searching for an explanation. "Did she just... thank you?" Reed nodded slowly. "I think she did." Rourke rubbed the back of his neck, looking around at his men. "You realize that alien just walked into our camp alone with her ships overhead and none of us fired a single shot." "She came for her daughter," Reed said. "Not for war." The commander exhaled sharply. "Well, congratulations, Captain. You just made first contact of the strangest kind." He shook his head and walked away, leaving Reed standing alone in the field. For the rest of the day, the camp buzzed with quiet talk. Everyone had seen it. The alien leader showing gratitude, the child running to her, the moment when both sides had simply stopped fighting. Soldiers who had once mocked Reed now looked at him differently, some with respect, others with confusion, and a few with something close to awe. That night, Reed sat outside his tent, staring at the stars. The camp was calm now, though tension still lingered in the air. He thought about the way the alien mother had looked at him, those eyes that had seen war and yet showed something more than hate. Maybe mercy wasn't as rare as everyone believed. While he sat in silence, a faint light blinked in the sky. He frowned and stood up, grabbing his binoculars. The light grew brighter, then he saw it. Several smaller Velari ships flying low, spreading across the horizon, not in attack formation but in a search pattern. His heart began to race. Something was happening again. The next morning confirmed it. A scout unit reported that the Velari fleet had withdrawn from 3 battlefronts. No more airstrikes, no more ground assaults. It was as if they had simply stopped. The human command network couldn't understand it. Messages poured in, each one asking the same question. Why had the Vailari suddenly halted their campaign? Reed knew. He didn't say it aloud, but deep down he knew the answer had something to do with the child and her mother. Later that day, Commander Rourke called him to the command tent. The air inside was heavy with the scent of burnt electronics and tension. The screen in the center flickered with messages from higher command. "Dawson," Rourke said, "Central Command is demanding an explanation. The Vailari have requested a ceasefire across all sectors. They specifically mentioned you." Reed blinked. "Me?" Rourke nodded. "Apparently their High Matron Zayara sent a transmission asking for direct contact with the human who showed mercy on Valeth Prime. She's calling you a protector of the innocent." Reed didn't know what to say. The entire war, every death, every battle, and now one small act of kindness was suddenly making the enemy talk about peace. "What do they want?" he asked quietly. "An audience," Rourke said, "in neutral territory. They want to meet in person," Reed frowned. "And command agreed?" "They're thinking about it," Rourke said. "But they want to know what you think. After all, you're the one she's asking for." Reed sat in silence. His thoughts went back to that moment in the field, the child's tiny arms clinging to her mother, the calm that followed. He knew this wasn't just about one rescue. It was about what came next. "If it stops the fighting," he said finally, "then I'll meet her." Rourke nodded. "That's what I thought you'd say." 2 days later, a small transport ship took off from the camp, carrying only Reed and a handful of unarmed diplomats. The journey through the atmosphere was tense, every vibration of the engines echoing in the quiet cabin. Outside, the silver shape of Zayara's flagship waited above the clouds, shining like a blade in the sunlight. When the transport docked, Reed stepped out first. The Vailari soldiers watched him carefully, their silver eyes unreadable, their armor gleaming. None raised their weapons. They guided him through long halls of light and glass until they reached a large chamber. Zayara stood there waiting, wearing no helmet this time. Her expression was calm but serious. Lyra stood beside her, holding her hand, smiling shyly when she saw Reed. The sight made his chest tighten. He had never expected to see her again. Zayara stepped forward. "Captain Reed Dawson," she said, her voice steady through the translator. "Your people and mine have been enemies for generations. But when you found my child, you did not act as an enemy. You acted as something my people have forgotten. Human." Reed said nothing for a moment, unsure how to respond. Finally, he spoke softly. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Zayara said firmly. "Not anyone. You risked your life for her. You defied your own command to protect what you could have destroyed. My daughter lives because of your choice." Lyra let go of her mother's hand and ran to Reed. She reached out, touching his sleeve as if to make sure he was real. Reed smiled and crouched down. "You're okay now," he said gently. The alien mother looked down at them and then back to the human diplomats. "I offer peace," she said. "Not because I fear your armies, but because one of your kind showed me what strength truly means." Her words echoed through the chamber. For a moment, no one breathed. P felt strangely calm, as if no one knew whether to salute him or arrest him. When he stepped into the main hall, officers stared in silence. Commander Rourke met him there, arms folded. "You've started something, Captain," he said, his voice half proud, half uneasy. "Something good, I hope," Reed replied. Rourke sighed. "Maybe command is in chaos. Half the brass want to make peace. The other half think this is some alien trick. They're arguing day and night." Reed nodded. "I figured they would. And you," Rourke continued, "are right in the middle of it. Everyone's talking about you, Dawson. The man who made the Silver Reaper bow." Reed didn't like the title. He wasn't interested in fame. "I didn't do it for that," he said quietly. "I just didn't want a child to die." Rourke gave a small smile. "Sometimes that's all it takes to change history." Later that evening, Reed was called to a large conference room where human diplomats and generals were gathered. Holographic maps floated in the air. The faces around the table looked tired but alert. The air was thick with tension and questions. An old admiral leaned forward. "Captain Dawson, you've met this alien leader. What's your judgment of her?" Reed stood straight. "Zayara is strong, disciplined, and proud. But she's also human in her own way. She cares deeply for her people, and even more for her daughter. I don't think she's lying about peace. I think she truly wants it. The Admiral studied him. You trust her? I trust what I saw, Reed said. I saw a mother who just wanted her child back. The same as any of us, a younger officer frowned. And what if it's a trap? What if she's using your kindness to weaken us? Reed met his gaze calmly. Then I'll face that myself. But I'd rather risk being wrong for peace than keep being right in a war that never ends. The room fell silent. For once, no one had an answer. Across the galaxy, aboard her own flagship, Zayara faced her own council. Her generals stood in a semicircle, each of them protesting loudly. You can't trust humans, one shouted. They've destroyed our colonies. They'll betray us the first chance they get. Zayara raised her hand and the room fell quiet. They saved my daughter, she said simply. When we left her behind, I expected only death. But a human carried her through fire. Tell me, which of you would have done that for the enemy? None spoke. The High Matron's voice softened. I have fought for decades. I have buried soldiers, friends, and family. I know the taste of war. It has no honor left in it. This man showed me something I had forgotten, that mercy is not weakness. Her generals looked down, ashamed or uncertain. She continued, We will talk peace. And if the humans betray us, then I will be the one to answer for it. Not you. Back on the human side, Central Command finally agreed to send representatives for formal peace discussions. Reed was asked to attend as an observer. He wasn't a diplomat, but everyone knew the talks wouldn't exist without him. The meeting took place on a neutral moon station, a vast dome of glass and steel floating between the two fleets. For the first time in living memory, humans and Vylari soldiers stood in the same room without weapons. Reed watched as the two delegations faced each other across a long table. Zayara was there, her daughter Lyra standing quietly beside her. When their eyes met across the room, Zayara gave him a small nod, a silent greeting between two people who had already changed the galaxy once. The talks lasted hours, turning into days. Both sides argued, shouted, and accused each other of lies. Old wounds resurfaced. Reed often wondered if it would all fall apart. But every time tension rose too high, Lyra would wander the room, small and curious, looking between the humans and Vylari alike. Her presence reminded everyone why they were there, to stop the killing, to protect the next generation. On the third day, when the final agreement was ready to sign, something unexpected happened. Zayara stood and removed the medallion she wore around her neck, the symbol of her command. She walked across the room and placed it on the table in front of Reed. You risked everything to save my child, she said softly. Let this remind your people that the war ended because one man chose compassion. Reed stared at the medallion. He didn't know what to say. The diplomats around him were silent, moved in ways they didn't show. Later that night, as the ships from both sides left the moon, Reed stood by a window, looking out at the stars. The galaxy seemed quieter now, peaceful for the first time in years. Lyra pressed her small hand against the glass from the Vylari ship as it drifted past, smiling at him one last time. Rourke's voice came over the comm channel. Captain, looks like you've just rewritten history. Reed smiled faintly. No, Commander, he said. I just did what any human should have done. Far away on her ship, Zayara looked out at the same stars and whispered to her daughter. Remember him, Lyra, the human who showed us what it means to have a heart. And so, while the armies stood down and the treaties were signed, stories began to spread, stories of one soldier who saved a single child and, without meaning to, saved two worlds. Months passed after the peace treaty was signed. The galaxy, once full of fear and hate, had started to breathe again. Human ships no longer patrolled with weapons ready, and the Vylari fleets no longer hovered at the edges of human colonies. Trade ships began to move freely once more, and the old war zones slowly turned quiet. On every planet, people whispered about the same man, the human soldier who had saved an enemy child and changed the fate of two civilizations. Captain Reed Dawson never cared much about the fame. To him it all felt distant, almost unreal. He had only done what he thought was right. Now he was back on Earth for the first time in years. The blue sky above felt strange after so long under the blackness of space. He stood on a cliff overlooking the ocean, the wind brushing through his hair. For once, there were no alarms, no explosions, no orders, just peace. Still, even peace carried its own kind of weight. Reporters tried to follow him wherever he went. Politicians wanted him at speeches and ceremonies. He refused most of them. He wasn't interested in being a symbol. He just wanted to live quietly and remember the faces of those who never made it back. One morning, as he sat in a small coastal cafe, a message arrived on his datapad. The screen blinked with a single symbol, the same sigil that had once been on the medallion Zayara gave him. Beneath it, only 3 words appeared. "We need you." Reed stared at the message for a long time before he replied. Hours later, a transport ship touched down near the shoreline. It was sleek and silver, clearly Vailari. When the door opened, a familiar face stepped out, Zayara herself wearing a long ceremonial cloak instead of her armor. Her presence drew every eye around. She smiled faintly when she saw him. "Captain Dawson," she said softly. "It has been too long." Reed nodded. "I thought I'd never see you again." "There are things you should see," she said. "Things that concern both our peoples." He hesitated only for a moment before agreeing. Soon the ship rose into the sky and broke through the clouds, leaving Earth behind. Inside the craft, the air was calm, filled with the soft hum of engines. Zayara sat across from him, her expression serious. "There are those among my people," she began, "who are not pleased with the peace. Old warriors, families who lost everything. They see this alliance as betrayal. They are calling themselves the Pure Flame. They've attacked 2 of our supply convoys and 1 human trade route." Reed frowned. "Terrorists?" "Yes," she said grimly. "And they are growing. If we cannot stop them, they will destroy everything we've built." He leaned back, thinking. "What do you need me for?" "You have your armies." Zayara's eyes softened. "They do not listen to me. But they remember your name. The human who showed mercy. They think you are proof that the treaty is a lie. That I've been deceived by a clever enemy. If you come with me, if you speak before them, it might stop what's coming." Reed exhaled slowly. "You want me to walk into a nest of angry soldiers who hate humans?" "Yes," she said simply. "Because you are the only one who can make them listen." He looked out the window at the stars. Part of him wanted to say no. He had done enough. He had already risked his life for peace. But then he remembered the small silver-eyed child clutching his jacket in the ruins of Valeth Prime. He thought about how far they had come, and how easily it could all vanish again. "When do we leave?" he asked. Zayara smiled faintly. "We already have." Hours later, they arrived on a distant Vailari moon. The landscape was dark and filled with rocky cliffs, glowing faintly under the alien sky. Hundreds of Vailari soldiers stood gathered in a vast hall carved from crystal and steel. Reed could feel their eyes on him, some filled with curiosity, others with open hate. Zayara led him to the center. The murmurs grew louder. Then a tall Vailari general stepped forward. His voice was sharp and angry. "You bring a human here, High Matron. The same kind that burned our worlds?" Zayara's voice was calm but strong. "This is the one who saved my daughter." The crowd shifted uneasily. Reed took a step forward, his hands at his sides. He spoke in a clear voice, letting his translator carry his words across the hall. "I am not here as your enemy," he said. "I fought in the same war. I saw what it did to both of us. I lost people too. But when I found that child on the battlefield, I didn't see an alien. I saw someone innocent, someone who deserved to live. If that is weakness, then I will wear it proudly." The hall went silent. His voice echoed through the chamber. Then he added, "You can keep fighting ghosts of the past, or you can protect the future your children deserve. The choice is yours." For a long moment, no one moved. Then one of the younger soldiers dropped his weapon. Another followed. Soon others began to kneel in respect toward Zayara. The general who had spoken earlier bowed his head. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "we have been blind." Zayara turned to Reed, her expression softening. "You did it again, Captain," she said. He shook his head. "No, they chose peace themselves. I only reminded them why it mattered." That night, as they stood outside under the alien sky, Zayara's daughter, Lyra, ran up to Reed, smiling brightly. She handed him a small flower that glowed faintly in the dark. "Mother says this flower grows only on peaceful soil," she said in her melodic voice. Reed took it gently, smiling. "Then I'll keep it safe." Fire and loss. Captain Reed Dawson stayed on the Vailari moon for several weeks after the meeting with the rebel group. His speech had stopped an uprising before it began. The pure flame had disbanded, their leaders surrendering to Zayara after realizing that hatred no longer had a place. Reed had become a quiet legend among the Vailari, known as the Protector, yet he still carried himself as a simple soldier. One evening, he stood on a high platform overlooking the alien city below. The light of twin moons reflected off the shining towers. Zayara joined him, her long cloak moving softly in the wind. "Our people are beginning to believe again," she said. "Not in victory, but in peace. You did more than end a war, Captain. You helped us remember who we once were." Reed smiled faintly. "I didn't do it alone," he said. "You chose peace when it wasn't easy. Most leaders wouldn't have." Zayara looked at him, her silver eyes calm. "You remind me of what leadership should mean," she said. "Not power, responsibility." They stood in silence for a while, watching Vailari children play below. Children who would grow up without the sound of air raids or alarms. Then Reed spoke quietly. "You ever think it'll last?" "It has to," she replied softly. "If not for us, then for them." The next day, Zayara invited him to the Great Council chamber. Representatives from both species filled the hall. Human diplomats, soldiers, and Vailari elders all sat together under the same roof. The air buzzed with cautious hope. The first official alliance between their two species was about to be declared. Hand and the human ambassador did the same. Together they signed the peace accord, the Dawson Treaty, as it would later be called. The hall erupted in applause, soft at first, then stronger, echoing like thunder through the chamber. After the ceremony, Lyra ran to Reed and hugged his leg tightly. She had grown since the war's end, her face brighter, her laughter stronger. "Mother says the war is gone forever," she said proudly. Reed smiled down at her. "Let's make sure it never comes back." That night, a grand celebration filled the city. Lanterns floated into the air like tiny stars. Humans and Vailari danced together, their languages mixing in joyful noise. Music echoed through the streets. For the first time, the sound of peace was louder than the sound of fear. Zayara found Reed near the balcony overlooking the city. "You should be proud," she said. "Not many men can say they changed two worlds." Reed chuckled softly. "I just saved a kid, remember?" Zayara smiled. "Yes, and because of that you saved everyone else." They watched as the night sky shimmered. Far above, a new space station, built jointly by humans and Vailari, shone like a bright beacon. It would serve as a center for diplomacy and science, a living symbol of unity. On its hull, written in both languages, were the words, "Peace through understanding." As Reed gazed up at it, he felt a deep calm. All the battles, all the losses, all the choices, somehow they had led to this. He knew there would still be challenges, arguments, and mistrust. But he also knew that the first step had been taken. Before leaving the Vailari moon, Reed met with Lyra one last time. She brought him a small crystal pendant glowing faintly in her hands. "It's for you," she said shyly. "Mother says it will guide you home." He took it gently. "Thank you, Lyra. You take care of her, all right?" She nodded seriously. "I will." As his transport lifted off, he looked down at the city lights fading beneath him. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, and for once they didn't feel cold. They felt alive. On board, he placed the crystal on the console and smiled. "For peace," he whispered, and somewhere far away, Zayara looked up at the same stars and whispered the same words. The galaxy would remember that long after the warships rusted and the scars of battle faded. It was not power or weapons that saved them. It was a single human act of kindness on a broken world that made even the stars stand still.